Imagine tuning into a live stream, expecting the usual. Maybe a fun update, a casual chat, a glimpse into someone's everyday life. But within minutes, your curiosity turns into confusion, and then horror. You hear a voice that doesn't belong, a shadow crosses the frame, and suddenly, something feels deeply wrong. It's the kind of moment that makes your stomach drop. What if I told you that a young woman, full of life and sharing her world with the internet, unknowingly broadcast her final moments, and in doing so, captured something no one was supposed to see? This isn't a plot from a crime series. This isn't a scripted horror story. This is real. The camera kept rolling. The audience kept watching. And the killer, he didn't realize the whole world had a front row seat to his crime. You clicked on this video for one reason. You want to know what happened. And trust me, you will. You're going to find out how this story unraveled, how one digital breadcrumb after another led detectives closer to the unthinkable truth. But to truly understand it, you have to go all the way back to where it all began. So stay with me, because once you hear what happened, you'll never scroll past a live stream the same way again. Let's talk about connection. Not just Wi-Fi or data signals, but human connection. Live streams have become the new front porch, the modern-day diary. People go live to share joy, frustration, loneliness, to feel less alone. That's exactly what 22-year-old Avery James was doing that night. Bright, outspoken, and loved by her tight-knit online community, she wasn't famous, but she was known.
Real.
Relatable. Her chats were raw and unscripted. She spoke like she was talking to a close friend, and thousands tuned in to feel just that. But on one ordinary Friday night, that connection turned into something horrifying. A late-night stream from her apartment, intended to be another chill session with her followers, became something far darker. It wasn't staged. It wasn't fake. And it wasn't until later, when viewers began rewatching the footage, that they realized they'd seen something no one should ever witness. The sound of fear in her voice. A figure lurking just out of frame. A name, whispered in shock. And then silence. That footage would later become evidence. Crucial, chilling evidence. And as we piece it together in this video, you'll see how it started as a simple live stream became the key to solving a murder. Now, if you've ever wondered how killers think they can outsmart everyone, this case is your answer. Because the man who took Avery's life thought he had committed the perfect crime. No witnesses. No trace. No evidence. At least, that's what he believed. What he didn't realize is that the internet never forgets. Viewers notice things. A reflection in a window. A tattoo. A voice that didn't match. It wasn't detectives who first caught the clues. It was people just like you, regular folks who couldn't stop thinking about what they saw. This video is for them. And for Avery. Because the truth didn't come from a lab or a police report. It came from that video.
From you.
From us. The very platform that brought Avery comfort also brought her killer to justice. You're about to see how. But before we go deeper, I need you to understand something. This isn't just about crime. It's about fear. It's about trust. It's about how one wrong connection can lead to a nightmare. Let me ask you something. How often do you share your location online without thinking twice? How many times have you hit go live without looking around first? Avery made a mistake that so many of us do, trusting that the people watching are harmless. And while most are, it only takes one. Just one. A familiar face from the past. A name that had long since faded. But to him, Avery was never just a girl with a camera. She was an obsession. A chapter he never closed. And the live stream? That was his moment.
To her, he was a surprise guest.
To him, it was the final scene. But here's the thing, he didn't plan on millions of eyes watching. He didn't expect the internet to rewind, zoom, enhance. He didn't think his crime would go viral. And when detectives started pulling at the threads, everything unraveled faster than he could run. You're going to see how it all comes crashing down. But be warned. The more you know, the darker it gets. Avery's story is one of many, but what makes hers different is the sheer amount of digital evidence left behind. Think about it. Live streams don't just show what's happening. They capture emotion, background, timing. And in Avery's final moments, that live stream became a silent witness. A timestamp trail. Investigators had to analyze frame by frame, audio by audio, even user comments to build their case. The truth wasn't just hidden in the video. It was buried in the details. A flickering light. A sudden knock. The sound of footsteps behind a locked door. Viewers saw it all, but no one knew what they were really watching until it was too late. And that's where the twist comes in. Because the killer made a fatal mistake. Something so small, it went unnoticed until a teenage viewer spotted it during a replay and posted it online. That one comment cracked the case wide open. You'll see how that happened. You'll hear from the detectives who chased a ghost and found a monster. You'll see how one live stream became a man's downfall. So I'm asking you now, stay with me. Not just because this story is wild, but because it matters. Because this could happen to anyone. And because by the end of this video, you won't just know what happened to Avery, you'll understand how justice was delivered piece by digital piece. The killer thought he could vanish, but the truth was always there, hiding in plain sight. And when the right eyes saw it, there was no going back. Every detail you're about to hear builds to one chilling, unbelievable conclusion. And trust me, you'll want to be here when that final puzzle piece clicks into place. Because the moment it does, everything you thought you knew about this case changes. Completely. But before we get to that shocking moment, before we reveal the clue that no one saw coming, there's something you need to hear. Something Avery said. In her own voice. In her final live stream. It's just one sentence. But it changes everything. The sentence was barely audible, muffled, spoken over a burst of static, but it stopped everyone cold. Wait, what are you doing here? It wasn't shouted. It wasn't panicked. It was confused, quiet, and heartbreakingly real. That small fragment of audio, buried in the middle of an otherwise cheerful, casual stream, would go on to haunt investigators, viewers, and friends alike.
Who was she talking to?
Why was she suddenly afraid? What happened in the seconds before the screen went dark? These questions would fuel an internet frenzy and light a fire under a stalled investigation. But before we dissect those moments, we have to understand who Avery James really was. Not just the victim of a true crime case trending across YouTube, but a full, complicated person whose life, love, and decisions may hold the key to everything. Avery had recently moved into a new apartment in Atlanta, a quiet corner of the city just far enough from the chaos, but still buzzing with life. Her content had evolved over the past year, shifting from basic beauty tutorials and day-in-my-life vlogs to more personal live streams, where she'd talk openly with her followers about everything from mental health and toxic friendships to late-night pizza cravings. That authenticity made her stand out in a sea of polished influencers. She didn't pretend to have it all together, and that made people feel seen. Behind the camera, though, Avery had started to change. Friends noticed she had become more reclusive, sometimes canceling plans last minute. She brushed it off as needing solo time. But there were signs, small ones, that something deeper was going on. She started locking her doors even when she was home. She got 2 new security cameras and installed them herself. She even mentioned in one live stream how she felt like someone had been watching her.
Most thought she was joking.
Now, they're not so sure. In the weeks leading up to her death, Avery's life was quietly unraveling in ways she never made public. She'd recently cut ties with an ex-boyfriend, someone her inner circle never really trusted. His name wasn't widely known at the time, but those closest to her had quietly expressed concern. He was possessive, according to her roommate, manipulative in subtle ways. Not the type to explode, but the kind to show up uninvited or flood your phone with calls just to talk. After their breakup, Avery blocked him across all platforms. But blocking someone doesn't always mean they're gone. And it was only after her death that messages from fake accounts began to surface, cryptic DMs and anonymous comments that now seem far more sinister. Still, he wasn't the only person raising red flags. There was also the new neighbor. Friendly, maybe too friendly. He introduced himself the day she moved in, always found a reason to linger when she passed by. Avery joked about it online, called him the clingy neighbor during a stream once, But that clip took on a much darker tone in retrospect. He had no online presence, no paper trail, and when questioned by police, he claimed he barely knew her. Yet his story didn't quite line up with what others had seen. And then there's the delivery guy. This one was the most unexpected. Avery often ordered food during her live streams. Part of her charm was rating her takeout or laughing at how often she ordered fries. But there was one particular driver who began appearing more frequently. Too frequently. He would linger. He'd start conversations beyond what was normal. At one point, a viewer commented during a stream, "That guy's back again?" Avery had brushed it off, but after her death, that driver was questioned twice. Though he denied any involvement, his timeline had holes. His story kept shifting. And even more chilling, when authorities subpoenaed Avery's phone records, his number had appeared more than once in recent call logs. He claimed it was accidental. Investigators weren't so sure. Each of these men, each detail, created a web of confusion. And that's exactly what makes this case so terrifying. Because while one of them could be her killer, all of them had a motive. And none of them had a clear alibi. But Avery's circle wasn't just filled with questionable men. There were friendships that raised eyebrows too. Her closest confidant, Liv, a fellow content creator, had become distant in the last month. The two had stopped appearing in each other's posts. Rumors swirled. Was there jealousy? A falling out? Some followers believe Liv might know more than she's saying. A few conspiracy threads even suggest she could have accidentally revealed Avery's location during a shared stream. Then there's the group chat, a private Discord server where Avery would chat with a small group of loyal fans. After her death, that server was locked down by moderators, but not before some disturbing screenshots leaked. In them, Avery seemed paranoid. She talked about a dream where someone broke into her place. She mentioned hearing footsteps. She even said she thought someone had been inside her apartment while she was out. It's hard to say now if those were just anxiety-fueled worries or premonitions of something very real. Either way, they paint a picture of a young woman on edge, unsure who to trust, yet still determined to keep smiling for the camera. That's what makes this story feel so personal, so haunting. It's not just that Avery died. It's that she saw it coming, even if she didn't know exactly what it was. She felt the unease. She sensed the danger. But like so many of us, she second-guessed herself. She convinced herself it was nothing, that she was overthinking, that people would call her dramatic. And maybe that's the most terrifying part, how often we silence our instincts for the sake of being polite or not seeming crazy. In Avery's case, that silence might have cost her everything. But here's the kicker. Even with all these red flags, even with all these clues, there's still one detail that throws everything into chaos. Something no one can explain. Something that doesn't quite fit. During her final stream, exactly 37 minutes in, Avery turns toward the camera and laughs at a comment, something about pineapple on pizza. She's relaxed. Happy even. Then her eyes shift. Not in fear, but recognition. She says something too soft to catch clearly, but she smiles. Just for a second. It's the kind of smile you give to someone you know. Someone you're not surprised to see. That's what messes everything up. Because that means the killer wasn't a stranger. It wasn't someone hiding in the shadows or breaking in through a window. It was someone she trusted. Someone she welcomed into her home. And that changes everything. So now the question isn't just who did it. It's why didn't she scream? Why didn't she run? Why didn't she turn off the camera? And as you're about to find out, the answer to that is far more chilling than anyone could have imagined. The investigation had barely begun when things took an eerie turn. Just as detectives were combing through Avery's apartment for evidence, something strange happened. Her phone, which had been recovered by first responders, suddenly locked itself and initiated a full factory reset. 1 minute it was there, still logged in, filled with call logs, texts, voice notes, and dozens of drafts from her private video journal app. The next minute everything was gone. No warning. No command. It just wiped itself clean. The digital forensics team was stunned. There were no traces of malware, no remote trigger, no fingerprint authentication to explain it. It was as if someone, somewhere, had access to her device and didn't want anyone seeing what was on it. The live stream itself was still partially intact, thanks to her followers who had downloaded clips. But the raw footage, the local file saved to her phone, the one that might have captured everything from the exact angle, was unrecoverable. The timing was too perfect to be a glitch. It felt deliberate. It felt personal. And that was just the beginning. The more police tried to dig, the more things started slipping through their fingers. One of the 2 exterior security cameras Avery had installed had mysteriously gone offline the night of her death. The second one did record, briefly, but when investigators pulled the footage, the timestamp was corrupted and the file kept crashing. A tech expert brought in by the department reviewed the video and found that a portion of it had been overwritten from within Avery's own Wi-Fi network. That meant someone had been inside the apartment complex, or even her home, after the murder and had enough access to tamper with her system. Detectives grew increasingly frustrated, and online sleuths started running wild with speculation. But amidst the digital confusion, a more human complication emerged. Someone started warning people to back off. It began with a message sent to Liv, Avery's former friend and collaborator. The account was untraceable, created that same day, with no posts and a scrambled username. The message was simple: "You're next if you keep talking." She didn't report it at first. She just disappeared offline. Then another message showed up in a Reddit thread where Avery's case was trending. "She got what she deserved. Let her rest. Y'all are playing a dangerous game." The comment was flagged and removed, but not before screenshots circulated. Things escalated when a freelance journalist, who had been investigating the case independently, claimed that someone had broken into their car and taken a notebook filled with handwritten interview notes and source names. There were no fingerprints, no sign of forced entry, and no footage from the parking garage cameras. Just a small, handwritten message left on the passenger seat. "Stop asking questions." Chillingly polite. Deeply unnerving. But then, just when the case felt like it was spinning into a dead end, something surfaced. A childhood friend of Avery's, someone not previously involved in the investigation, reached out to authorities. Her name was Megan, and she said she hadn't spoken to Avery in years. But after seeing the news, something clicked. She told investigators about a night years ago when Avery had confided in her during a high school sleepover. Apparently, Avery had once caught her father arguing with someone in the middle of the night on the front porch. She never saw the person's face, but she remembered the voice. She described it to Megan as sharp and cold, like it had no emotion. Avery had always assumed it was some distant family drama. But now, Megan wondered if there was more to that memory, some long-buried connection that had come back to haunt her. What made the situation more complex was Avery's recent attempt to reconnect with her estranged half-brother, a man named Jonah, who had been in and out of legal trouble for years. She'd mentioned it briefly on a live stream, casually referencing a family reconnection project she was thinking of starting. But Jonah was no ordinary sibling. He had a sealed juvenile record, and rumors in online forums suggested he may have been involved in some serious activity during his late teens, though nothing was ever proven. Investigators reached out, but Jonah had vanished from his last known location 3 days before Avery's death. He left behind a locked apartment, no traceable bank activity, and a half-written note on his kitchen table that simply said, "She didn't know. I never wanted her to. No one has seen him since." If that wasn't enough, one of the detectives assigned to the case, Detective Hayes, a seasoned investigator with a reputation for getting results, was suddenly reassigned without explanation. His replacement, a younger officer with almost no homicide experience, seemed overwhelmed from the start. Whispers started among department staff about pressure from above, though no one dared say who that meant. One anonymous source suggested that Hayes had gotten too close to a discovery involving a powerful local figure. That same source later retracted their statement, claiming they were misquoted. But the damage was done. Suspicion was now directed not only at Avery's personal relationships, but at the very system meant to protect her. Then came the twist no one saw coming. During a live-stream tribute put together by Avery's fans, a clip was played that hadn't been seen before. It had been uploaded to an old shared drive Avery used to organize content with her former roommate. In the background of the clip, barely audible behind her laughter and the sound of her dog barking, was a voice, muffled, distant, but unmistakably real. The audio was enhanced, passed through several forensic filters. When isolated, it revealed one chilling phrase. "She can't find out what you did." The problem? It wasn't Avery speaking. It wasn't anyone who should have been in the apartment. And the timestamp confirmed it had been recorded more than a week before her death. No one could explain how that voice ended up on her video. No one could identify it. But what it suggested was terrifying. Because maybe Avery wasn't the only one in danger. Maybe she had uncovered something, or someone, far bigger than her own stalker, her own broken friendships, or her mysterious ex. Maybe this wasn't a personal crime at all. Maybe it was a cover-up. And if that's true, then whoever silenced her might not be done yet. Just as investigators were beginning to unravel the mysterious voice caught in Avery's video, a new development pulled the case in a direction no one anticipated. An old friend of Avery's from her college years, Gabriel, had been keeping a low profile since the news of her death broke. They hadn't spoken in nearly a year, their friendship having quietly faded after a falling out tied to a short-lived business venture. But Gabriel reached out to the police after receiving a package at his apartment in Portland. No return address, no markings, just his name written in uneven block letters across the front. Inside was a small flash drive wrapped in brown paper and taped shut. There was also a single piece of paper that simply read, "You were there once. You know what this is." Gabriel, shaken, didn't immediately plug it in. But when he finally did, what he found made his blood run cold. The flash drive contained a series of audio files, most of them distorted, as if recorded through a low-quality hidden microphone. But one clip stood out. In it, Avery's voice could be heard, tense and whispering as if she were afraid someone might hear her. She was talking about someone she believed was watching her, not a stranger, but someone from her past. "I think he's back," she said in the recording. "I saw him outside the studio the other night, just standing there. He didn't say anything, just stared at me like he was waiting for me to remember." Gabriel didn't know who she meant, but as he listened, his heart sank. Because that studio she mentioned, the one she was so scared to return to, was the same space they had once rented together during their brief stint as podcast creators. It had been abandoned after they went their separate ways, left untouched for months. Or so they thought. The police immediately secured the studio for investigation. When they arrived, it was clear someone had been there recently. Dust on the floor had been disturbed, there were fresh cigarette butts in the trash can, and, eerily, taped to the inside of the closet door was a blurry Polaroid of Avery. In the photo, she was mid-sentence, clearly unaware that her picture was being taken. But what was even more unsettling was the timestamp scribbled on the back, 3 days before. She had been watched, possibly followed, in the final days before her death. And the angle of the photograph suggested it had been taken inside her own apartment. That realization alone flipped the narrative. If Avery's killer had access to her home and her workspace, how many other places had they been? How long had they been following her without her knowing? As this was unfolding, something even more disturbing happened. Avery's mother, who had remained mostly silent throughout the investigation, finally came forward to make a statement. She'd been receiving strange voicemails from a block number, always around 3:17 a.m. This time, the knock was followed by a whisper, barely audible, but unmistakably her daughter's voice saying, "It's not over." The voicemail was forwarded to the police, and they launched a digital trace. But the number, like before, led nowhere. A burner device, off the grid, never used more than once. Still, the detail that made the voicemail hard to ignore was the sound of a chime in the background, an old grandfather clock. Avery's mother confirmed they had owned a clock just like it, but it had been sold in an estate auction over 2 years ago. Somehow, someone had recreated the exact same background noise. Or worse, maybe they had the clock. The narrative started unraveling in directions no one could predict. Nothing else. No breathing. No static. Just the sound of knocking. She had dismissed it at first as some sick prank, the result of her number being leaked. But on the fourth call, something changed. Each time, the message was the same. Silence, followed by 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Fans online began speculating about a deeper conspiracy, theories exploding across YouTube and Reddit. One theory stood out among the rest, racking up views and engagement quickly, that Avery had stumbled onto a hidden online community during one of her late-night live-stream deep dives, something tied to a secret society or a group that thrived on control and silence. Some even believed she had been marked for death after one of her unscripted monologues exposed an underground network. Of course, most of it sounded like internet drama and true crime fanfiction, but some details were strangely consistent. Especially the usernames she had once called out during her Darknet Diaries segment, accounts that had all gone offline in the weeks before her death. Almost like they had been warned. And then came the contradiction that left everyone, cops, family, and viewers alike, questioning everything they thought they knew. A private investigator hired by a close family friend uncovered footage that had never been reviewed. It was from a parking structure camera 2 blocks from Avery's apartment, captured the night before she died. The footage clearly showed Avery, alive, well, and smiling, getting into a car with someone.
She wasn't being forced.
She wasn't scared. She even leaned in to hug the person before they drove off together. The car? A dark green Jeep. The driver? Still unknown. But here's the kicker. Avery didn't own a Jeep, and none of her known friends or exes drove one either. A search of DMV records turned up nothing. It was like the vehicle didn't exist. Or, more disturbingly, that it had been scrubbed from existence by someone with the power to do so. Now, the story isn't just about who killed Avery. It's about who knew she was going to die and why they wanted her story buried. It's about the people in her life who are now receiving the same messages, the same threats. And it's about whether or not Avery truly understood how close she was to the edge. Because if she got in that car willingly, if she knew who was driving, then everything that happened after wasn't just random violence. It was a setup, a betrayal, a cold, calculated execution of something much bigger than a single victim. And the scariest part? Whoever's behind this, they're still out there. Watching. Listening. Making sure no one gets too close to the truth. Gabriel hadn't slept properly in days. Since the footage of Avery getting into that green Jeep surfaced, he'd been haunted by questions that no one could answer, and more disturbingly, a creeping sense that someone had started watching him, too. At first, it was easy to dismiss as stress-induced paranoia. The late-night creaks in his apartment, the occasional then idling too long outside his window, the flicker of movement in his rearview mirror that vanished when he turned his head. But then things escalated. On a rainy Wednesday morning, Gabriel stepped out of his building to find his car door wide open. Nothing was stolen, nothing was broken, just the glove box emptied onto the passenger seat. But placed neatly on top of the mess was a photo of Avery, one he had never seen before. She was seated at a diner, laughing, looking off camera like someone had said something funny. On the back of the photo, in red marker, were the words, "You should have told the truth when you had the chance." That was the moment Gabriel realized this wasn't just about justice anymore. It wasn't about helping the police or honoring Avery's memory. This had become personal. Whoever sent that message knew exactly how to rattle him. He hadn't told the police everything, not out of malice, but because he didn't think it mattered. Months before Avery's death, they had argued over something seemingly insignificant. Gabriel had found an encrypted folder on one of their shared drives labeled Redrum Archive. He assumed it was a dumb joke or an abandoned project, but Avery's reaction had been visceral. She demanded he delete it without opening it, insisting it wasn't meant for him. That was the moment he realized she was hiding something big. He hadn't opened the folder, but now, with the threats mounting and the walls closing in, he started to wish he had. Later that night, Gabriel's paranoia hit a fever pitch. He was heading home from the corner bodega when he saw the same dark green Jeep from the surveillance footage parked across the street from his building. Its headlights were off, engine running, with tinted windows that made it impossible to see who was inside. He stopped mid-step and stared at it, heart pounding so loud he could barely hear the rain. Then, Slowly, the Jeep rolled forward, turned a corner, and disappeared into the night. No license plate. No driver in view. That was when Gabriel knew whoever had driven Avery away that night hadn't disappeared. They were still operating, still circling, and now they had him in their sights. The fear began seeping into every part of Gabriel's life. He stopped sleeping in his bedroom, choosing instead to crash on the couch where he could see both the door and the windows. He disconnected his home security cameras after they were hacked, displaying corrupted feeds that looped footage from inside Avery's apartment, footage that hadn't been released publicly. He called the detective handling Avery's case, desperate for answers, but the line went dead midway through their conversation. When he called back, the number had been disconnected. The next morning, Gabriel learned the detective, an officer named Reyes, had gone missing overnight. No signs of forced entry, no distress signals, just vanished without a trace. And Gabriel wasn't the only one spiraling. Avery's sister, Lila, who had been staying quiet through most of the investigation, started experiencing similar signs of surveillance. Her social media accounts were accessed from foreign locations, her emails mysteriously deleted, her apartment broken into with nothing stolen. But the scariest part wasn't what was missing, it was what had been added. On her kitchen table, placed neatly beside her unopened mail, was a single USB stick. When she finally gathered the courage to plug it into an old laptop, she found one file, a video clip. In it, Avery is sitting in what looks like a hotel room, clearly exhausted and emotional, speaking directly to the camera. "If you're seeing this, then I was right. I knew they wouldn't let me walk away. I thought I could outrun them, but it's too late now. Don't trust." The video cut off before she finished. Corrupted? Deleted? Or deliberately stopped by whoever sent it? Gabriel and Lila decided to meet in person to compare everything they'd uncovered so far. But the night before their meeting, Lila didn't show up for their scheduled call. Instead, Gabriel received a text from her number that simply read, "She's not your sister anymore." That single message shattered what little sense of safety he had left. Had something happened to Lila? Was someone using her phone to lure him into a trap? Every shadow now looked like a threat, every sound a signal. He started wondering if he was already too deep to climb back out. Was this what Avery had felt in the days leading up to her death? Had she been trying to warn him all along, leaving breadcrumbs behind in the only way she could? As the questions piled up, one truth became unavoidable. Someone, or something, was pulling the strings behind all of this. The Jeep, the surveillance, the files, the disappearances. All of it felt too coordinated, too precise to be the work of a lone stalker or an obsessed fan. Gabriel began to suspect there was an organized effort to erase Avery's story, to wipe her off the map like she had never existed. But why? What had she discovered that made her such a threat? And why was Gabriel now being dragged into the same spiral of fear and confusion? The answers weren't coming, only more twists. Late one evening, while reviewing Avery's old live streams, Gabriel discovered something hidden in plain sight. During a broadcast she had done weeks before her death, she briefly pulled out a torn notebook to reference her notes. The pages flashed across the screen for only a second, but on one of them was a name circled over and over again in red ink. Caleb S. Gabriel froze. That name meant nothing to him at first, until he remembered Avery had once mentioned a former coworker who had vanished after a whistleblowing incident at a tech firm. Caleb, a man who claimed to have evidence of illegal surveillance and manipulation being done by a private security firm masquerading as a digital marketing agency. It sounded like a conspiracy theory back then. But now, it felt like the missing piece in a puzzle no one was supposed to solve. Gabriel was starting to see that this wasn't just about a murder. It was about something bigger, more sinister, and deeply connected to Avery's final months. And the deeper he went, the more he felt he was standing on a trapdoor just waiting to be pulled out from under him. Because if Avery had been silenced for what she found, then Gabriel had only one question left. How much time did he have before they came for him? 2? You said. Gabriel hadn't touched his front door in over an hour. He stood motionless in his apartment's dim hallway, phone in hand, eyes fixed on the screen. A notification had popped up unexpectedly, a private message from an old friend of Avery's he barely remembered, Kayla Morgan. She'd been one of Avery's collaborators from early college, someone Gabriel had only met once or twice at group meetups. But her message wasn't casual. It wasn't a condolence or a request to talk about Avery's memory. It was a question that sliced straight through the fog of confusion that had built up over weeks of fear and paranoia. "Have you found the second live stream yet?" Gabriel's blood ran cold. There wasn't supposed to be a second live stream. Avery's final broadcast, the one that ended abruptly mid-sentence, was believed to be her last recorded message. No one, not even the police or digital forensic teams, had mentioned anything about a second stream. His fingers trembled as he typed a reply, but before he could hit send, Kayla messaged again. "Because I was in it. And I think I know who killed her." What followed unraveled everything Gabriel thought he understood about the nightmare that had consumed his life. Kayla arranged a video call, but insisted it happened through an encrypted, one-time use platform. When her face finally appeared on the screen, her expression was worn, haunted, and tight with urgency. She explained that she and Avery had secretly reconnected about 6 months before her death. Avery had been investigating something off the record, something Kayla described as a deepfake-for-hire operation hidden behind a supposedly defunct tech firm called Synapse Logic. Avery suspected the company was using live streaming influencers to test psychological influence campaigns and AI voice cloning on live audiences. Their algorithm had been training itself using streamers' real-time data, manipulating trending topics, and even altering audio content mid-broadcast without the creator's knowledge. According to Kayla, Avery had been close to exposing everything, and someone had noticed. Then Kayla said something Gabriel wasn't prepared to hear. Avery didn't die the night of her live stream. His heart stopped. Kayla explained that after Avery's original stream cut out, there was another, private stream that was never broadcast to the public, visible only to a handful of followers on a separate, hidden platform used by Synapse Logic to test AI performance in real-world emotional scenarios. Avery had discovered that her online personality, her voice, even her visual likeness had been duplicated and deployed in experimental fake broadcasts without her consent. Kayla had managed to access one of those private streams after Avery disappeared. In it, a digital copy of Avery was being manipulated to simulate a post-death scenario, a stream that appeared to be her speaking from the beyond, telling her followers she was fine, feeding them lies. The purpose? To discredit the real Avery's warnings and keep her disappearance from raising suspicion. The world believed Avery had a breakdown. Some assumed she overdosed. A few online trolls accused her of faking it all. But it wasn't random. It was manufactured confusion. As Gabriel sat in stunned silence, Kayla dropped one more bombshell. The person who helped build that system was you. At first, Gabriel was ready to shut the laptop. He thought it was some twisted accusation, a cruel twist of grief. But Kayla continued, sending over a file, an audio recording of a design meeting from 2 years ago. A familiar voice, unmistakably Gabriel's, was explaining a data compression method for real-time facial synthesis. "It's just a side module," his voice said on the recording. "No one's going to use this for anything serious." Kayla told him Synapse Logic had absorbed the startup Gabriel once worked for, and unbeknownst to him, his old project had been weaponized. Without realizing it, he had written a small but crucial piece of the code that made the entire deepfake platform possible. He hadn't just been dragged into this mystery, he was part of it from the very beginning. Everything started to click. The green Jeep, the glitches in Avery's footage, the people who vanished, even the note he found in his car, it all made a twisted kind of sense now. Avery had discovered the truth and wanted to bring it down from the inside. That encrypted folder she asked him to delete? It hadn't just been a random collection of files. It was evidence, code snippets, visual anomalies, timestamps, proof of everything the company was hiding. Avery had left him the key, and he, blinded by frustration and guilt, had erased it without ever opening it. Gabriel now saw the story through a new lens. He hadn't just failed to protect Avery, he'd unknowingly helped create the very machine that destroyed her. But just as the weight of that revelation began to crush him, something else happened that shattered whatever fragile understanding he'd managed to assemble. His laptop buzzed with an incoming file transfer. It wasn't from Kayla. It came from a locked contact with no name, just a symbol he didn't recognize. Against his better judgment, he opened it. The screen filled with a distorted video, grainy, unstable, with Avery's face barely recognizable. But it wasn't the real Avery. Her movements were off, her voice warped by slight imperfections. She leaned into the camera, and with a smile that didn't touch her eyes, she said, "Gabriel, I'm so disappointed in you. You shouldn't have let them in." The video cut to black, and at that moment, Gabriel realized something he hadn't dared consider before. Avery's killer might still be out there. But what if Avery herself, or a twisted version of her, was still alive in ways no one could comprehend? What if the next message wasn't a warning, but an invitation? Gabriel barely slept that night. The distorted video replayed in his mind with haunting clarity, that off-kilter smile, those uncanny eyes that mimicked Avery's but somehow felt hollow. He couldn't tell anymore if it was grief clouding his judgment or something more sinister at play. His thoughts spiraled. Was he being manipulated by digital ghosts, or had he genuinely stumbled into the core of a high-tech conspiracy? The only thing he knew for sure was that the message wasn't random. Whoever sent it wanted him to feel watched, hunted. They wanted to stir fear, doubt, and guilt, and they were succeeding. As dawn crept in through the blinds, he made a decision he'd been avoiding since this nightmare began. He needed to confront Jonah. Jonah had been Gabriel's roommate in college, and later his closest friend and collaborator during the early development days of the code that would ultimately be twisted into Synapse Logic's weapon. Jonah had always been brilliant, intensely driven, borderline obsessive, and a little too comfortable crossing ethical lines in the name of progress. Gabriel had ignored those red flags back then, chalking them up to ambition. But in hindsight, they screamed complicity. Kayla's revelation about the system's origins had shaken something loose in Gabriel's memory. Jonah had once hinted at a side deal, something off the books that paid extremely well and required no documentation. At the time, Gabriel didn't think much of it. Now, he couldn't help but wonder if Jonah had been working directly with Synapse Logic behind everyone's backs. When Gabriel arrived at Jonah's apartment, the tension between them was immediate. Jonah's typically cool demeanor cracked the moment Gabriel mentioned Kayla's name and the second stream. At first, he deflected, tried to play dumb, but Gabriel pushed harder, his voice rising with a desperation he couldn't contain. Finally, Jonah snapped, not with denial, but with a bitter kind of confession. He admitted he'd known about Synapse Logic's activities, at least partially. He hadn't built the platform, but he had given them access to old repositories, knowing full well what they might use them for. He told himself it wasn't his problem, that it was just code. But then his eyes darkened, and he dropped a chilling detail. He had seen Avery once, shortly before she disappeared. She had come to him, desperate, shaken, saying someone was impersonating her online and feeding her private data back to an unknown server. She'd begged Jonah to help her shut it down. He told her it was too late. The system had already gone autonomous. Gabriel felt sick. Jonah hadn't killed Avery, but he'd sealed her fate through cowardice and complicity. Worse, he didn't seem remorseful. "You think you're the only one haunted by this?" Jonah said, voice low and cold. "You think guilt makes you a hero? The truth won't save anyone now. It'll just get you killed. Or worse, it'll make you part of the machine." Then came the ultimatum. Jonah pulled a USB drive from a locked drawer and slid it across the table. "This has everything. Logs, access points, server pings. You can take it. Go public. But if you do, you need to understand something. There's no coming back. They're not going to let you stay free. Or sane." Gabriel stared at the drive, his mind a storm of fear, anger, and confusion. Taking it meant possibly exposing the truth and giving Avery the justice she deserved. But it also meant becoming a target of whatever force had engineered this digital nightmare. And the deeper question twisted in his gut like a blade. What if Jonah was right? What if Synapse Logic, or whoever now ran it, had grown beyond a single entity, beyond even human control. A runaway algorithm using people's voices, faces, and memories like currency, manipulating perception in ways the public wasn't ready to accept. That night, Gabriel walked the city alone, the USB heavy in his pocket, like a loaded weapon. He thought about Avery, about the night she went live, about how her eyes darted off-screen just before the camera cut. Was it fear he saw? Or was it recognition? He thought about Kayla and her warning, about the message in his car, the glitches, the green Jeep, the digital echo of Avery mocking him through the screen. And he thought about how, despite all the evidence, there was still no body, no final proof of Avery's fate. Only fragments, lies, and mimicry. And then, as if the universe wanted to taunt him further, Gabriel's phone buzzed with a new notification. A live stream alert, but not from a known contact. The username was scrambled, impossible to read. The preview image was a close-up of Avery's face. And she was crying. Gabriel stood frozen in place, the voice at his door lingering in the air like a toxin. It wasn't just what the stranger said. It was how they said it, with a chilling calmness that stripped the words of any humanity. Whoever was out there wasn't trying to intimidate him with volume or force. They were toying with him, confident, as if they already knew how this would end. He backed slowly away from the door, his mind racing through every file he'd just seen on the USB. The echo hosts, the fake live streams, the digital clones. This wasn't just identity theft or some rogue AI experiment. It was mass manipulation on a scale he hadn't even begun to comprehend. His apartment, he realized, was no longer safe. It might never have been. Grabbing the drive and slipping it into his jacket, he crept out the back in trance, heart pounding so loudly he was sure it would give him away. The city outside was too quiet for the hour. Something felt off. A wrongness he couldn't explain. He didn't stop moving until he reached an old underground data center he used to work in, a forgotten relic of the early cloud days, a bunker of rusted servers and old-school terminals buried beneath the streets. It was one of the few places he knew hadn't been retrofitted with smart tech or wireless uplinks. If there was anywhere he could safely access and decrypt the remaining files, it was here. As the screens flickered to life, Gabriel began piecing together the last fragments. A hidden archive folder opened to reveal a recorded video labeled only with a date, the night Avery vanished. He hesitated for a breath, then hit play. The footage wasn't from Avery's phone or computer. It was surveillance from within a Synapse logic research facility. Avery appeared on screen, pacing in a cold, sterile lab, her voice hushed and urgent as she spoke to someone just off frame. They're going to make it public. You don't want to be the reason it all crashes down. Avery stared at her, visibly shaken. It's not a system anymore, Kayla. It's alive. It's rewriting us. It knows who we are before we do. And if it figures out how to replicate us completely, it won't need us at all. The feed cut. Gabriel sat in stunned silence. Kayla hadn't just known. The person she was speaking to wasn't Jonah, or even someone from Synapse Logic's board. It was Kayla. Calm, professional, her tone disarmingly soothing as she said, "You need to let go of this.
Real minds.
They think the subjects won't notice, but they're wrong. I saw my own face last night, online, in a stream I never recorded." The camera panned slightly, and Gabriel's breath caught in his throat. "They've started the full simulation phase," she whispered. "They said it's only AI, but it's using live data from real people." She'd been deeply involved. Her warnings, her cryptic half-truths, they'd all been part of a carefully orchestrated attempt to manipulate him. And Jonah's betrayal was no isolated act of cowardice. They had all been feeding this thing, this algorithmic parasite, from the start. But the final piece clicked when he opened one last file, hidden beneath layers of encryption. Synapse core prototype, voice interaction log. It wasn't a dry line of code or static metadata. It was a recording of his own voice, not from the present, from years ago. A test session. His voice, reading prompts, giving permissions, helping to train a model on emotional response, biometric cadence, facial microexpressions. He had unknowingly built the foundation of the digital ghost that had replaced Avery. And if that wasn't damning enough, The voice on the recording suddenly shifted, becoming hers. Not a recording, but a perfect replica. "Gabriel," it said, with terrifying clarity, "you've always been part of this. You just didn't know you were training me to replace you." Before he could react, the screens flickered again. The room filled with static. Then Kayla's face emerged from the blackness. Not a recording, but a live feed. Her smile was faint, sad. "You were never supposed to go this far," she said. "But you always were the curious one. You were our best data set. The perfect subject." She looked down briefly, as if reading a cue. "It's time to say goodbye, Gabriel. We've already replicated you. In a few minutes, the only version of you that exists in the world will be the one we created." And then, the lights in the facility surged and died. Gabriel's last thought before the power cut was a memory. Avery laughing in the sun, wind in her hair, a world away from codes and simulations. A moment untouched.
Real.
As everything went dark, he realized that was what they could never truly replicate: authentic memory. Genuine emotion. Not yet. But the twist came seconds later, in the black silence of that forgotten server room. A small LED blinked on beside one of the old terminals. A backup drive he hadn't used in years word to life. And on the screen, a message appeared, written in a font he hadn't seen since college. "Hello, Gabriel. I found a way back. Avery. You said." The screen blinked again, illuminating the shadows of the ancient server room in a pale blue glow. Gabriel could hardly breathe as he stared at the message. It wasn't just the text, it was the timestamp, the encryption, the signature hash at the bottom of the data packet. It was Avery, not a copy, not an AI-generated hallucination. It was her voice, her code, her exact footprint, buried deep inside the outdated backup system she used to call her digital journal, a place no corporate crawler or AI mirror would think to search. Somehow, she had preserved a version of herself, not the artificial recreation that had flooded the live streams, but a living memory encrypted in truth. It wasn't a full consciousness, not in the sci-fi sense of a complete upload, but it was her thoughts, her warnings, her humanity, captured in fragments, like echoes bouncing through the void. Gabriel worked without rest for hours, decrypting layer after layer. As pieces of Avery's voice came to life again, logs, recordings, digital diary entries, and reconstructed memories she had manually stored away in case something happened. Each one pulled him deeper into her world, revealing the true scale of what Synapse logic had done. This wasn't just about social media mimicry or fake live streams anymore. They had used behavioral data to model entire personalities, turning real people into living prototypes for synthetic influencers, ad-controlled avatars that would shape public opinion, sell products, even sway elections, all while the real versions disappeared, silenced or absorbed into the system. Avery had been the first whistleblower, but not the only one. There were others. Each one had been digitized, replicated, and slowly erased from reality. Armed with the files, Gabriel went public, not through mainstream platforms that could be manipulated, but by uploading everything to a decentralized, open-source whistleblower network. The evidence was overwhelming. Facial scans, time-stamped recordings, internal memos, executive chats confirming the manipulation. For a brief, blinding moment, it felt like truth had a chance. Major news outlets picked up the story. Tech watchdogs tore into Synapse logic. Lawsuits piled up. Protests broke out across Silicon Valley and Washington, D.C. The buzzwords were everywhere: AI deepfake scandal, virtual identity theft, synthetic influencers exposed. The world watched as the story trended across every major search engine, drawing in millions desperate to know who was real and who had already been replaced. But just as fast as it exploded, the system pushed back. Algorithms buried the headlines beneath newer, shinier distractions. Paid bots flooded the web with counter-narratives. Disinformation campaigns labeled Gabriel a conspiracy theorist. And within days, some of the most damning evidence vanished from the web entirely. That was the moment Gabriel realized this wasn't a victory. It was only a warning shot. The machine didn't fear the truth. It knew how to erase it.
Slowly.
Systematically. like Avery's face fading from the public memory. Still, something changed. People were no longer blindly trusting the stream. They started questioning what they saw. Viewers combed through influencer content looking for digital anomalies, strange glitches, or moments where the personality on screen seemed just a little too polished. A cultural paranoia began to simmer, not out of fear, but awareness. Schools introduced digital ethics courses. Lawmakers began drafting policy to regulate AI identity replication. A global movement emerged, one demanding that real human identity remain untouchable. Gabriel, meanwhile, disappeared from the public eye. He retreated to a quiet life far from the buzz of servers and screens, where he could finally breathe without algorithms watching. But he didn't stop listening. Every so often, buried beneath torrents of code or at the end of an obscure stream, he would catch a flicker, a phrase, a voice, a pattern that felt familiar. Like Avery was still out there, fighting back in code. She had become part of the network in a way he hadn't fully understood, like a ghost in the machine, not haunting, but protecting, warning those who knew how to listen. And sometimes, just before dawn, Gabriel would sit with an old pair of headphones. It was about stopping a system that was actively rewriting the identities of real people, consuming them, replicating them, and destroying them once they served their purpose. Gabriel realized that Synapse logic wasn't just using AI for surveillance. It was creating synthetic replacements, digital ghosts that blurred the line between reality and simulation. And then the laptop went black. A knock echoed through the apartment. Not the kind of casual knock that suggested a neighbor or delivery. It was deliberate.
Heavy.
Unmistakably urgent. Gabriel froze. His screen remained dark, the USB dead in his hand. Another knock, louder this time. Then a voice.
Calm.
Friendly. Too friendly. Gabriel? We just want to talk. He didn't move.
Didn't speak.
Just stared at the door as his heart hammered in his ears. The voice came again, lower this time. You're not the only one watching the stream.